The fire that burns inside you is no longer asking for permission to exist. It has matured, it has sharpened, and it refuses to be dimmed by the shadows of others. This new version of you doesn't beg to be understood. It radiates in its own brilliance, daring the world to catch up or step aside. The time of doubting your own voice has ended. The age of rising without apology has begun. The universe has shifted the stage beneath your feet, and what once demanded justification now demands embodiment. Energy is no longer wasted on convincing those who were never meant to walk beside you. This path is about alignment, not approval. You have been entrusted with a stronger presence, a deeper clarity, and the certainty that no explanation is required when destiny speaks through you. The days ahead are not empty. They are alive with trials that will sharpen your core. A subtle challenge disguised as a small offer will arrive to test whether you truly know your worth. A plea wrapped in urgency will try to stretch your compassion into compromise, and a moment of truth will strip away the masks of those around you, showing you who was built to remain and who is only passing through. You didn't stumble here by accident. You were led. If something in your spirit is stirring, don't ignore it. Tap join to access exclusive content, prophetic insights, and a community of purpose-driven souls. This isn't just a membership, it's your moment of alignment. Step into who you were born to be. Welcome to the Chosen. But before any of these shifts take form, a shedding had to occur. A chapter closed without ceremony. The self that once tolerated disrespect, that once bent to fit smaller rooms, has dissolved. That identity served its time, but it cannot breathe in the air of your future. That old self once thought endurance was the highest virtue, that swallowing discomfort proved loyalty. But in truth, it was only slowing the rhythm of your spirit. It carried burdens that were never yours to hold, silently fueling others while starving itself. That self is gone, buried in the silence between yesterday and today. Now, as the curtain rises, those who fed on your hesitation will notice the absence of their supply. They will scramble, not because your light faded, but because it no longer props up their illusions. They will feel the collapse of their comfort, the tremble of foundations you no longer hold together. And this is where you stand, unshaken, unbent, unapologetic. Not as someone who needs to prove, but as someone who already is. The energy you once gave away returns to you in full force, igniting a season where nothing and no one can persuade you to shrink again. What you once mistook for kindness was really the slow erosion of your own strength. Offering endless forgiveness wasn't compassion. It was self-abandonment dressed as virtue. Now that you've stepped into a place where your presence carries its own undeniable weight, there's no possibility of returning to the days when you deluded yourself for acceptance. Every moment of silence, every unnecessary apology, every compromise of your truth had been tallying up like invisible markers, waiting to be revealed in full. There were countless signs whispering that you were betraying yourself. The sinking feeling after excusing behavior you should have called out. The exhaustion that followed conversations where your voice shrank just to protect someone else's comfort. The restless nights replaying moments where you knew you could have stood taller, but chose instead to soften the edges for those who did not deserve that shelter. Each moment, though painful, was a signal pointing you toward a new path. What you didn't see at first was that every hesitation was a rehearsal. Every swallowed truth was practice for the moment you'd be asked to stand firm. The universe was engraving lessons into your spirit, training you to recognize the unmistakable tension of dishonoring yourself, so that when the test arrived, your body would already know. This is the line I will not cross. Each repeated pattern, each choice to protect others at your expense, was not wasted. It was forging a backbone of steel. And so, the first test appeared when your guard seemed lowest. Someone approached, cloaked in politeness, but dripping with disrespect. What looked like generosity was in fact a cheap trade, an attempt to barter your essence for scraps. The moment was jolting, not because of the insult, but because it finally illuminated how long you had been undervaluing your own worth. The shock of it wasn't humiliation, It was ignition. It cracked open old programming that insisted you should always be grateful, no matter how little you were given. That encounter proved something irreversible. The person you once were no longer exists. Where you would have once mistaken exploitation for support, you now saw it as plain as day. Where you once softened your refusal with guilt, you now stood grounded and unwavering. The shift was undeniable. You were no longer the one who tolerated crumbs while offering banquets of your energy. But the next trial was already weaving its way toward you. Someone familiar, someone who remembered your old ways, was preparing to step forward. They would arrive cloaked in need, speaking in tones designed to trigger your instinct to rescue. But what they truly sought wasn't healing, it was access. And in that moment, you would feel the difference, because your spirit no longer bends at the sound of desperation that comes with hidden strings attached. This is not only your transformation, it is part of a larger wave. Across the world, countless others are setting down the masks they once wore, refusing roles that drained their fire. Those who genuinely love will adapt, even if they don't fully understand. Those who only thrived on your absence of boundaries will lash out, because your refusal exposes their dependency. And in this unveiling, the truth finally sorts itself. Who belongs in your future, and who can only exist in your past. If your heart overflows with God's blessings, let that love shine. Click the super thank you button and give $50 or more to plant seeds of faith that will impact countless lives. Your generosity reflects His abundance. Be a vessel of His grace and watch His kingdom flourish through you. Growth isn't proven by words, but by resistance. And the moment you began refusing old patterns, the world around you rushed in to see if you meant it. Offers appeared dressed in respect, but dripping with hidden motives, wrapped in polite gestures, yet rooted in the hope that you'd still bend the way you once did. They weren't testing your talent. They were testing your conviction. They wanted to know if your new strength was solid or if the right pressure could shatter it. And as you held firm, the truth of their intentions revealed itself, not admiration, but disbelief that you could finally stand without shrinking. The pressure came in subtle disguises. Familiar voices trying to lure you back into roles you'd already outgrown, speaking in tones that once made you doubt yourself. They wanted reassurance that your transformation was temporary, that eventually you'd return to being the reliable source of comfort they depended on. They couldn't comprehend that refusing to carry their burdens didn't make you cruel. It made you free. And so they accused you, projecting lack onto your fullness, calling you detached for protecting your own energy, labeling you cold for refusing to sacrifice your peace again. Then came the test closest to home. It didn't arrive from strangers or distant acquaintances, but from someone who had witnessed your evolution with their own eyes. They saw your boundaries in action, heard your voice sharpen, and still extended an invitation back into spaces you had already left behind. It wasn't ignorance, it was defiance. They hoped that by pretending nothing had changed, you'd step back into the role that made them comfortable, ignoring the cost it carried for you. This is where the deeper work begins, not in private rituals, but in the everyday moments where your new self collides with old expectations. It's not about chanting mantras, but about saying no when your body tenses at the thought of repeating history. It's in holding silence when manipulation begs for reaction, in refusing to explain the choices that are already non-negotiable. This is the arena where spiritual strength isn't an idea, it's a decision. And in those decisions, something powerful rises. It is the aspect of you that protects instead of appeases, that draws lines instead of erasing them. Not a force that dominates through fear, but a presence that steadies the room by declaring what will and will not be allowed. It doesn't scream, it doesn't argue. It simply holds, unshaken and immovable. This side of you carries a new clarity. It knows when to extend kindness and when to withdraw completely. It understands that true compassion doesn't mean endless access, and that real love often arrives with boundaries that keep chaos out. Where once you confused tolerance with strength, you now see that the greatest gift you can give is the refusal to let others disrupt the harmony you've built. And so you stand, rooted deeper than ever, no longer afraid of being misunderstood. What once felt like loss now feels like liberation, because the people who cannot honor your transformation were never meant to stay. The test was never about them. It was about proving to yourself that the foundation you've built cannot be shaken, no matter how many times they knock at the door of your past. The third challenge unveiled just how deeply your rebirth had taken root. What once would have pulled you into maintaining appearances now pushed you to honor your inner clarity. The urge to attend out of courtesy was replaced with the decision to protect your own field of peace. The need to justify your absence dissolved into the strength of standing firm in your presence. And in that moment, the feminine power within you rose, not the fragile version that seeks validation through pleasing, but the sovereign essence that carries itself with undeniable worth. It is the aspect that welcomes blessings without apology, that draws lines without fear, and that chooses alignment over approval. Those who bristled at your change revealed more about themselves than about you. They weren't mourning your growth. They were mourning the end of their easy access. The opportunist who thought a small gesture could buy entry. The old acquaintance who believed guilt would still bend your will. The familiar face who assumed closeness meant entitlement. All of them had been leaning on the weight you used to carry for them. Their frustration wasn't with your evolution. It was with the collapse of the false comfort your silence once provided. Their accusations of you being distant, demanding, or unrecognizable only exposed their reliance on your old patterns. You didn't become harsh. You became whole. What unsettled them was not that you rose, but that you stopped dimming your light so they could sit in the shade. Their resistance was never about your choices. It was about the end of their convenience. The trials you faced weren't random events. Each encounter was tailored to measure the firmness of your new foundation. The dismissive offers weren't about generosity, but about probing whether scarcity still lived in your decisions. The pleas for help weren't about genuine need, but about testing if guilt could still unravel your boundaries. The social overtures weren't about unity, but about dragging you back into spaces that starved your spirit. None of it was personal. It was the universe's way of asking if you truly trusted your own voice. Your choices weren't rejections of people. They were affirmations of yourself. Declining to play in draining environments didn't mean you condemned others. It meant you refused to sacrifice your vitality for their comfort. Saying no to manipulative requests wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. Drawing lines around your time and energy wasn't selfishness. It was sovereignty. Every decision you made in those moments testified to a new truth. They weren't warnings of a cold heart. They were signals of a healed one. They showed that you no longer confuse compliance with compassion or endurance with love. They revealed that you now understand the cost of living without boundaries, and you are unwilling to pay it again. And so each test served as confirmation. The new you is no longer a fragile flame in the wind, but a steady fire that cannot be smothered by expectation. You've shed the version of yourself that endured for others at the expense of your soul. What remains is a spirit fortified by self-respect, luminous in its refusal to shrink, and alive in the knowledge that protecting your energy is the purest form of devotion to your path. Those around you had no trouble celebrating the fractured version of you, the one who second-guessed every choice, who offered time and energy without ever asking for reciprocity, who accepted scraps of acknowledgement as though they were treasure. That version was convenient for them. It kept their needs centered, and your light dimmed. The reason they resist your transformation isn't confusion. It's the loss of control they once held over a self that no longer exists. The revelation breaking through now is that validation was never required for your liberation. Permission slips from others were illusions you no longer need to chase. Your worth is not dependent on applause, on comprehension, or on consensus. The only real requirement is the willingness to let go of the fantasy that your wholeness must keep others comfortable. True strength is found in choosing to upset those who expected you to keep shrinking for their benefit. This next stage of your becoming may feel sharp, but it is sacred. You've been cast as the villain not because you've grown cruel, but because you've grown clear. Clarity has a way of unsettling those who profit from confusion. Your heart hasn't hardened. It has become disciplined. Your compassion hasn't died. It has learned to flow in your direction as well. You are not abandoning love. You are learning that love without limits is not love at all. It is depletion. What unfolded through each trial wasn't random circumstance, but a stripping away of illusions. The moment you stopped explaining to those who only wished to misunderstand, you uncovered their true face. The instant you refused to justify your worth to those who could never afford it, you saw who was truly invested. And when you no longer rearranged yourself for those unwilling to meet you halfway, their disappointment revealed the roles they were playing. The loyal ones celebrated. The users resisted. The aligned rose to meet you. The draining ones clung, desperate to keep you tethered. Every reaction you encountered was a mirror. Accusations of selfishness exposed dependency. Manipulation revealed entitlement. Victimhood uncovered hidden control tactics. Each attempt to bind you to old programming became an invitation to affirm your new reality. With every refusal, you declared that your life is not a stage for others' unresolved wounds to play out. This path is not watched with judgment, but with reverence. The universe moves in rhythm with your choices, echoing your strength into the collective. Each no you speak plants seeds of courage in others who have yet to find their own voice. Every act of self-respect writes a new script for what it means to live awake, to love yourself enough to be misunderstood without bending. In protecting your spirit, you give permission for countless others to begin protecting theirs. And so, this isn't a conclusion but an initiation. You are stepping into mastery, where self-love is not theory but embodiment, where the endless search for approval dissolves, replaced by the certainty of your own worth, where the tests themselves reveal their hidden design, to prove you cannot be bought with crumbs, cannot be guilt into silence, and cannot be dragged back into a version of yourself that no longer fits. You now walk as someone who knows the cost of peace, and you are willing to pay it only in the currency of truth. Living in alignment is not simply about keeping distance from those who dismiss your boundaries. It is about honoring the sacred essence within that recognizes its worth without applause. It is the moment you step into the role your younger self needed, the one who no longer bends to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. It is the living example of what it looks like when a soul chooses itself fully, without excuse, without justification, without shrinking. The rules that once governed you have been torn apart. Agreements born from fear, vows made from insecurity, promises rooted in the belief that love meant losing yourself. All of them have been dissolved by higher authority. You now live under new laws, where peace outweighs performance, where energy is no longer given without care, and where boundaries are sacred covenants never again to be violated. The lessons of your trials merge into one profound truth. Spirituality and discernment are not opposites. They are companions. Real strength means learning to offer love without collapsing, to serve without being consumed, and to remain connected to the divine while releasing those who drain your spirit. What once felt like contradiction now stands revealed as wisdom, maturity that protects as much as it embraces. This moment marks your passage into a higher chapter. It is not an end, but an initiation into deeper clarity. Every challenge, every closed door, every boundary held has led you here, to the understanding that to betray your authenticity is to betray the divine itself. You did not arrive to dim. You did not come to perform smallness. You came to radiate so brightly that your self-devotion reminds others of their own hidden brilliance. The voices of criticism are not proof of your misstep, but reflections of their own lack. Those who call you selfish reveal their dependence. Those who name you difficult expose their discomfort with standards. Those who brand you unkind are confessing their disappointment that you will no longer sacrifice your wholeness for their convenience. Their words are not mirrors of your truth, but echoes of their limitation. The freedom rising now declares that the past version of you owes nothing to anyone. You don't need to offer roadmaps to explain your choices to those who never intended to understand. You don't owe softness to people angry that you won't collapse anymore. You don't owe your presence where your spirit feels unwelcome. The old you has been laid to rest, and no one is entitled to resurrect them. The new framework you live by is direct and simple. Meet what is offered, but never overextend. Return respect when it is shown, but never chase it where it is absent. Treasure your inner stillness as the rarest resource, guarding it with the vigilance of someone who knows its worth. This season is not about false humility, but about sacred preservation. And in embracing it, you step into the collective transformation, where every choice to protect yourself ripples outward, teaching others that love without limits is not purity, but self-erasure. The world is calling for your unshaken light, not a diluted version, and those who cannot walk beside it were never written into your destiny. The moment a person decides to honor their own truth, the impact extends far beyond their personal life. Somewhere right now, another awakening soul is observing the way you refuse to entertain disrespect and is gathering the strength to protect their own peace. Someone who saw you decline an invitation without justification is realizing that absence is a right, not a crime. Someone who watched you draw the line without debate is learning that a firm no needs no decoration. What you did for yourself has already become a lesson for others. This is the unseen responsibility that comes with expansion. Every choice to prioritize your well-being ripples outward into the collective, giving silent permission for others to follow. Each time you protect your time and energy, you act as a reminder that self-worth is not selfishness. Each moment you refuse to dim your essence so others can feel taller, you model what it looks like to embrace the fullness of light. And those who failed their tests with you are now being guided to new classrooms with someone else. Those who once underestimated you are still repeating old patterns. The one who thought they could trade crumbs for access is likely trying their bargain with someone else. The one who once leaned on guilt to bind you is already searching for another willing heart to drain. The one who mistook your presence for obligation is puzzling over the emptiness that arrived when you withdrew your energy. This isn't punishment, it is balance. Growth doesn't mean revenge. It means allowing people to face themselves in spaces where your protection no longer shields them. Let them meet others still entangled in the same cycles, for their learning requires it. The truth is, your refusal to shrink has altered your entire frequency. When you stop carrying the burden of constant justification, when you stop allowing your value to be determined by those who cannot see it, when you genuinely stop apologizing for standing tall, something irreversible happens. Your presence begins drawing in experiences that match your strength. People arrive whose respect mirrors your own. Opportunities come that require no begging, only readiness. The alignment you've been craving becomes natural because your field no longer welcomes misalignment. Every moment of disappointment was preparation for this. Every betrayal became rehearsal for discernment. Every time you felt drained by giving too much, you were learning the sharp contrast between authentic gratitude and quiet exploitation. Each hollow feeling in your chest after surrendering your power was training you to recognize the alarm before it sounds. What felt like suffering was actually the forging of your new instincts. And now, those instincts serve as guardians. They whisper before your boundaries are crossed. They tighten when something feels off. They release when alignment is present. This sensitivity is no weakness. It is your inner compass that refuses to let you betray yourself again. What was once pain has transformed into wisdom, ensuring you walk into every room, carrying the strength of awareness. The shift within you has become a beacon. You didn't only change your life. You've become a map for others still wandering in the fog of self-betrayal. You are living proof that refusing to play small does not isolate you. It elevates you. And with each boundary, with every unapologetic choice, you are quietly rewriting the rules for everyone who is watching. What you model today is what frees someone else tomorrow. The stabilization of your new frequency is already rewriting the dynamics around you. Those who once fed off your openness begin retreating, not because you forced them away, but because your field no longer permits their presence. The subtle manipulators, sensing their influence has evaporated, abandon their strategies. Even those who once dismissed your boundaries as unnecessary now shift their tone, speaking to you with a caution they never carried before. This isn't performance, it's the undeniable reflection of your strengthened essence. Spiritual growth rarely gets described this way, but it's not just about cultivating kindness or peace. It's about transforming into a being who instinctively filters out low vibrations without having to fight them. Your refined awareness becomes a gate, letting in only what aligns with your wholeness. Your healed presence acts like a natural shield, drawing those who honor it and deflecting those who cannot rise to meet it. The higher you stand, the less accessible you become to anything that thrives on imbalance. The most striking shift, however, is the one within yourself. You remember the heaviness of betraying your own voice to maintain surface harmony. You remember the ache of apologizing for things that weren't yours to carry. You remember the fatigue after extending yourself where your care was never valued. Those memories no longer dictate your present. Now there's lightness where there once was dread. Now there is steadiness where there once was fear. Now there is freedom where there once was guilt. Ironically, some of your fiercest critics are quietly studying you. The very people who mocked your boundaries, who branded you cold or arrogant, are now inching toward the same choices in their own lives. They bristled not because your path was wrong, but because your clarity exposed what they hadn't yet dared to claim. What they condemned out loud, they now imitate in silence. Proof that your embodiment teaches louder than any explanation ever could. This is how transformation spreads through a collective. Not through debates, not through persuasion, but through example. Others will feel the difference in your presence long before they admit it to themselves. They will see the peace you carry, the balance you protect, and realize that your strength doesn't take from anyone. It only inspires. Every boundary you hold shows someone else it is possible to protect themselves. Every act of self-respect becomes a ripple of awakening that no lecture could produce. And as you grow steadier, new lessons line themselves up ahead of you. Larger tests will come, carrying sharper disguises, but instead of dread you feel anticipation. The thought of standing your ground now excites you. What once terrified you now feels like practice for sovereignty. Boundaries are no longer burdens. They are demonstrations of love, first for yourself, then for others. This shift is the clearest evidence of mastery. No longer afraid to disappoint, you recognize that disappointment often means liberation. You understand now that refusing to play small is the greatest kindness you can extend to yourself and to those watching. What once felt like conflict now feels like alignment. What once felt like loss now feels like evolution. And with every step forward, you prove that choosing your truth doesn't just transform you. It transforms everything in your orbit.